This right here is the G100, and this is not the point of Micro Four Thirds, but this is the GH6 with the 25 to 50. Maybe neither is this. And I don't know what the hell this is, but you know, we'll talk about this later. So obviously, while these two cameras have a lot in common, they also have a lot different, maybe more different than what is similar. So again, what is the point of Micro Four Thirds? Is it the size? Is it the price? People seem to think so, but it really isn't, and it hasn't been for a really long time. Not sure why people keep saying this. I mean, I do know why. Actually, let's get into that. Let's see why people think that one of these things is what a Micro Four Thirds camera should be, and why one isn't. So just like everything, what people say about Micro Four Thirds and the state of the cameras in that system has more to do with what people say and repeat than what is actually the truth. Way back in the day when this system first got started, obviously the size was a big selling point compared to large, bulky, mirrored cameras, but almost all mirrorless cameras are smaller. Even the 4/3 cameras were big compared to Micro Four Thirds, and that was more due to the mirror being removed than the sensor size. But the sensor size didn't, hurt anything. Speaking of the sensor size, that is another reason why people think, well, if the sensor is smaller, surely the camera must be smaller as well. People who think that have clearly not used many Super 35 cinema cameras or 16mm film cameras, which are pretty big compared to their image size. And yes, so the sensor size is smaller, the body sizes can generally be smaller if they need to be. There's a lot of good stuff going on there, right? That's how you get cameras like this very cute G100 right here and this 15mm f1.7 lens. So a lot of this comes from a historical standpoint where these cameras started out pretty small, but they rapidly got pretty big. I mean, even the G1 is not a super small camera, the very first one, and the GH1 is not that small after that. But to summarize this first point, let's just say that the fact that they have the ability to make it small makes people tend to say that it should be small, which I don't really agree with personally. The second thing I wanted to address is the price. Now, a lot of people tend to think, well, it's a smaller camera, it should be less money. Well, smaller things just in general in life are not always cheaper. In fact, there's barely a correlation. If you look at a lot of filmmaking gear, in fact, the smaller versions of things, the more compact versions of things, they're so specialized that every once in a while they need to cost the same or more than their bigger counterparts. To make something smaller but just as effective is not as easy as it might sound. But if we go back and look at the prices of the actual cameras, the G1, the very first Micro Four Thirds camera from Panasonic, started at $800. That's not adjusted for inflation or anything like that. I'm not going to do that math, but you might be saying that's pretty cheap. I know even a lot of times people today want a $500 or less camera. That's still over that even to this day. The GH1, the very first GH camera, the classic, was $1,500 when it came out. And this camera was rocking a hard 1080p 30 and a 720p 60 frames per second, which again, it was good for the time. Honestly, it really was. But looking back, who's paying that money for a camera these days? Well, fast forward to the GH5, maybe the biggest jump in technology in modern camera history, definitely Panasonic history, with IBIS, 4K, 4K 60, all these 10-bit codecs, some of the first 10-bit codecs and 4K codecs many filmmakers had access to for any amount of money. And that camera was $2,000. So a 25% increase for all of those features is pretty insane. But still not a cheap camera by any means. And now with the G9 II coming in at $1,900, it's even cheaper than the GH5. And instead of 4K 60 8-bit, we've got 4K 120 and almost 6K 60, all at 10-bit unlimited recording for $100 less than the GH5 from years ago. So if the advantage here isn't the price and it's not the size, what is it? When we have cameras that look like this and cameras that look like this from the same manufacturer with the same sensor size, what is the advantage here? And well, I think I just said it. The advantage is that there are both of these cameras, that you have cameras that are tiny and small and compact and can fit in some kind of jacket pocket, a fairly big one, but still a jacket pocket, and this kind of camera, which looks like a full frame camera, if we're going to be honest. What this boils down to is just versatility at the end of the day. We've got a GH6 with dynamic range, rolling shutter, and image quality to just barely compete with APS-C and full frame cameras, pretty close, very, very close, with amazing frame rates and resolutions and all that sort of thing, but for a lot less money and with a lens mount that easily can swap over to something cute like this. And you can even pare this thing down, and the GH6 with the 12-60 kit lens does not really feel like that big of a camera. It's not small, but it's not big either. So we are allowed to have in the same manufacturer, the same system, the same lens mount, the same menu systems and color profiles and everything, big cameras and small cameras and everything in between. So you can have a photo beast like the G9 II or even the original G9. You can have a small pocketable camera like the G100 or GX, whatever those other ones are, or a compact camera like the LX100 that I had for a while. I still miss that camera, by the way. You can go up to a professional video camera like the GH5 Mark II, the GH6, or even use your G9 II for this as well. Or you can get a professional cinema camera like the box cameras from Panasonic, the Blackmagic Pocket 4K, the Z cams, and some of those cameras are Netflix approved. You know, you can, a camera that shares the same mount as this tiny thing is approved by Netflix. What other system does that? Tell me. I challenge you. I don't, they'll be hard pressed. You can get full frame results or very, very close to full frame results for a fraction of the money with advantages in value, resolution, frame rates compared to full frame cameras of the same price, or save a bunch of money. Instead of spending like $6,000 on a full frame camera that can do 4K 120, you can get a used GH6 for $1,300 or a G9 for $1,800 or $1,900 that'll do almost as good of a job for almost as many types of work. It's very hard to pare down. You can do it with some APS-C cameras, I'll give you that, but full frame, getting down to a size as small as Micro Four Thirds is close to physically impossible. But building up a Micro Four Thirds camera to give you nearly full frame results is very, very possible. And you could argue I've made in my entire career on doing that same thing. Although I do have full frame cameras now, i.e. the one that's filming us right now. Full frame has its place. I'm not going to say it doesn't, and it is objectively better, but practically I don't always see that difference, and my clients definitely don't. No one's ever asked me, do you have a full frame camera? No, no one knows what that even is. So we've got our strengths, we've got our things dismantled. I think I've talked about this enough, but historically and even today, Micro Four Thirds is constantly matching or just under full frame, sometimes even better with stuff like rolling shutter, right? And it's only very recently that some very expensive full frame cameras have surpassed what Micro Four Thirds can do. So yeah, if you want to spend $8,000 on a Nikon Z9, be my guest. These cameras, like I said, are not cheap, but they do remain very good value. The GH5S has held on to its value until very, very recently and still sells for almost $1,000 pretty regularly. And that basically means you're getting the most features per dollar. You know, you get a used GH5 Mark II, you've got 4K 60, 10-bit, and open gate. What other cameras are giving you that kind of features for that price? And like I talked about in this video right here, there are tons of used budget B or C or starter cameras to jump into Micro Four Thirds if you're either not sold or you just need some extra cameras or you want to try out one of these cute small cameras. There's so many used ones of these. The G100 is still like not super cheap, but there's a lot of cheap ones out there. So anyway, I just had to finally address this because I hear these talking points so often, and I get why people think them, but I just really felt like, as someone who has used Micro Four Thirds cameras for so long, that I just wanted to get my thoughts out there on the real advantages from my perspective and what these cameras can really do, and get away from this whole price and size thing. Anyway, guys, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for listening to this rant. I did have a bullet points. I don't know if I hit them all, but I hope this was not too far of a tangent in any direction, and I hope I got all the points across pretty well. But let me know, do you agree that versatility is the strength of Micro Four Thirds? And if not, what is it? And why do you keep picking Micro Four Thirds? And if you don't pick Micro Four Thirds anymore, you switch to full frame, tell me why. Before I go, if you stayed this long, you're going to hear me say anything, right? I kind of see Micro Four Thirds kind of like the Joker or Batman or Godzilla. These characters that remain relevant because of their versatility. You know, you can have a award-winning, Oscar-winning film like Godzilla -1 or The Dark Knight, and then you can have like Batman the Animated Series, or you know, Godzilla X Kong, or Godzilla Kong, I think is what it's called. You know, you can have the serious stuff and the fun stuff, and it's going to be okay. The versatility is why these characters and this camera mount, I think, has stuck around as long as it has, and I think that's another reason why it's going to stick around for a long time into the future. And I hope people understand what I'm talking about, because otherwise I'm just going to sound crazy. I just was looking for an excuse to interject Godzilla into everyday conversation, just like I do in my real life. See you.